76% of U.S. workers reported at least one symptom of depression or anxiety. That's up 17% in just 2 years. Why did the pandemic have such a negative impact on our mental health?
Well, David, thank you for asking. This is one of the great concerns I have about our country now and going forward is how do we address the mental health crisis that is impacting so many Americans, particularly young people? And I think a couple of things that are worth saying here. When it comes to COVID itself, COVID added so much strain to people's lives. Not only were people worried about their health and the health of their loved ones, but their lives were turned upside down, especially in the early days of the pandemic. That's why it's so important that we worked hard to get our kids back to school and give people the opportunity to see their loved ones again. That's an important part of your mental health and well-being. But the workplace is worth focusing on in particular, because keep in mind, people who are working full time spend, close to half of their waking hours at work. And your work affects your mental health, but it also turns out that the mental health of workers impacts an organization. It impacts their productivity of workers, it impacts creativity, it impacts retention. So the reason I issued a Surgeon General's framework on workplace mental health and well-being is to lay out 5 key essentials that organizations can use to build a foundation for mental health, which will not only help workers, but keep in mind, will help the bottom line and the longevity of organizations themselves.
So what's the most important thing employers can do, and how does remote work impact that?
Yeah, so the most important thing that employers can do is to bring workers into the conversation about how to improve mental health. Bring them to the table and make sure that their voice is helping shape your approach to mental health and well-being. You can take the framework that we put forward and use it to begin that conversation by asking workers how the organization is doing on those 5 fronts. And those 5 essentials, by the way, include protection from harm, that's physical and psychological harm. A second involve building connection and community at work. Third, work-life harmony. Fourth, ensuring that people know that they are valued, that they matter at work. And fifth, making sure that people have opportunities for growth. We recognize some companies are doing great in some of those areas. In other areas, they have areas to improve. We wanted to put this framework forward so people knew what that roadmap was, because now more than ever, we've got to invest in mental health for the sake of individuals, organizations, and society as a whole.
Means a lot. Look, I wear my mental health struggles in the past as a badge of honor. I have suffered from depression and anxiety most days, quite frankly. How do we address the stigma that's attached to mental health in the workplace? And is there any way to address affordability and access?
Well, Dave, first, thank you for your courage in standing up and sharing your own story. I say that as somebody who not only cares about this, but has struggled myself with mental health concerns over the years, especially when I was a child. I think the way we address the stigma, it starts with people stepping up and sharing their stories. It starts with leaders in organizations helping people understand, not just in words, but in deeds, that we're going to support people with their mental health and well-being. Look, if somebody fractured their leg and needed to be out for a few days for surgery and recovery, we would say that seems perfectly understandable in the workplace. Yet too many workers do not feel comfortable. They're having a mental health crisis saying, you know what, I need a little bit of time to go see a therapist to get some help. We have to change that, and leaders can change that, again, but through the force of their example. But finally, just keep this in mind as well, that, at a time where I know workplaces are feeling like they have a lot on their plates, a lot that they have to deal with, it's important that we recognize that mental health is really, when we invest in it in the workplace, it's a win-win for both workers and for the workplace in the short and long term. But also, a lot of these measures that we're talking about in the framework I put forward, they don't require heavy capital investment. Sure, there are some areas like providing paid leave to employees, ensuring that they have adequate time off to rest. These may require some investment of time. But when it comes to building an environment where people can come to know one another, building a culture of gratitude and appreciation, ensuring that people know that they are valued, and ensuring that there's a boundary between work and non-work time that's respected. These are things that we can do with little capital investment, but they return huge dividends.
Really appreciate what you're doing on mental health in the workplace. One tip on addressing the triple-demic in the workplace. See this pocket square? It's actually a mask. See that? We can encourage that. And boom. What do you think, Doc?
Well, listen, I'm glad you brought it up, because one thing that we have learned is that masks are an effective tool at reducing the risk of spreading, not just COVID, but other viruses as well. So particularly for those, who are at higher risk, or if you're living with somebody at higher risk, during this time when there are a lot of respiratory viruses circulating, using that mask can be an effective way to reduce the risk to you and the people around you.
And a way to stay in style. U.S. Surgeon General Dr. Vivek Murthy, great to have you, sir. Really appreciate the time.
Thanks so much, Dave. Great to be with you today.
All right, good to see you.